Hello, class, and welcome to our review of our writing logically, thinking critically terms. We're right about the midpoint of the semester when we kind of get started on essay number 3. So, what I'd like to do is review the terms from the first half that you've been explaining quite well, I might add, on your reading review quizzes. Keep up the good work. Everybody's giving details and examples. And I'd like to review those terms with a critical thinking eye on the play Hamlet, and kind of use examples from the play to continue to better understand how these concepts, these strategies, these ideas from writing logically, thinking critically, um, help us to become better thinkers and writers, specifically with essay 1, with essay 2, and in the future with essays 3 and 4. So what I'd like to do and is start with worldview on page 3. And the idea of worldview, it has to do with, right, these perceptions, right, and where we get them from. In many contexts today, right, this idea of worldview is a set of assumptions about the world and the behavior of people in it. And when people have illogical worldviews, um, it becomes problematical. So, what I'd like to do, there's a specific scene in Hamlet that I find very effective for the purpose of analyzing the first half terms, and I'll kind of go through them briskly. I've already mentioned them on the lecture videos in the past, but think of this as kind of a mid-semester Hamlet review. The play opens with the idea of Gertrude remarrying Claudius. Right? Gertrude remarries Claudius soon after the king is dead. Now, some people, worldview, think it's too soon. Right? Hamlet is disgusted by her sexual interest in Claudius, and quite frankly, he attacks all women in general. He's very stereotypical towards women. So if you're going to look at this from a gender criticism standpoint, in his mind, Gertrude can't resist the desires to be romantically involved. And again, I think we can all agree he's a little bit too involved in his mom's romantic endeavors. But we also see it from a different perspective. And that brings us to the idea of dialectical thinking. When we look at things from multiple perspectives and we use Rogerian strategy to have empathy, to make concessions, right? Maybe it's a power move, right? Maybe Gertrude is doing this, right? Because she wants to retain power as queen. So why is it something that's vilified by Hamlet? She's not doing anything wrong, regardless of whether you think it's too soon. I kind of look at it, right? The worldview. Personally, I would wait longer to when I was, when I was younger, we would always talk about how long do you wait to date someone after they broke up with a friend of yours, a friend's ex. I'm not even talking about your dead husband's brother. Plus, we have this, idea that Hamlet feels as though his mother is uh, not being truly genuine towards honoring his father's memory. So his worldview is different from perhaps her worldview, but we never really get into the mind of Gertrude about why she chose to marry Claudius. It's kind of a mystery, but dialectical thinking, right, from that standpoint, looking at both sides of it. Just because you might not agree with her worldview doesn't mean that it might be valid. And I think that we see the idea of gender criticism when we look at worldviews, when we look at cultural criticism and discrimination based on gender, based on race, based on orientation, based on sexual preference. So again, as you're analyzing literature, the second half of the semester for essays 3 and essay 4, as you're thinking about cultural criticism, gender criticism, LGBTQIA theories, queer theory, and various types of criticism that can focus on the idea of worldview. Much like in some ways we see in this scene that I've kind of queued up here, when Claudius in Act 3, Scene 3, right, is confessing to us, right? And we have the free version of Shakespeare online. It's the easiest way for me to kind of go through and point these ideas out. We see here the idea of his worldview with regard to his crime. And this brings up bigger picture issues like justice. What is true justice for Claudius? I mean, when we think about it, so many people have to die before he actually dies. Again, what is Hamlet's revenge is somewhat of an afterthought, or does he achieve that justice, and at what expense? The notion of capital punishment. What is true punishment for certain levels of crimes? For Hamlet, in this scene, right, what he realizes, he thinks Claudius is praying, hidden assumptions, right? And those hidden assumptions lead him to refrain from committing the act of murder. But Occam's razor, another term from Writing Logically, Thinking Critically, tells us that when we have possible solutions, right, the one that makes the least amount of new assumptions is usually qualifier, usually the most logical. So Hamlet does not use Occam's razor here. So if we look at how he could have better used critical thinking skills to avoid certain aspects of this tragedy, think about how many hypotheticals have to be true. But first, let's look at Claudius's worldview here with regard to the crime he's committed and whether or not he's sorry and can be forgiven. Oh, my offense is rank. It smells to heaven. Nice personification. It hath the primal eldest curse upon it, a brother's murder. Nice allusion to the Bible. Pray can I not? Okay, fact number one. Remember, we want to have facts to support our inferences, premises to support our conclusion. And when Hamlet says, oh, he's praying, right? Hidden assumption one, I'm not going to kill him because he's praying. Hidden assumption two, he'll go to heaven. Hidden assumption three, my father's in purgatory. If I kill him and he goes to heaven, I haven't really done justice to his memory. Hidden assumption four, I'm going to wait and try to get him, blah, blah, blah. We'll get to that moment, right? But we see here, fact, he can't pray because he's not sorry. Though inclination be as sharp as will, nice simile. My stronger guilt defeats my strong intent. Personification again. And like a man to double business bound, I stand in pause where I shall first begin, and both neglect. What if this cursed hand were thicker than itself with brother's blood? Is there not rain enough in the sweet heavens to wash it white as snow? Whereto serves mercy but to confront the visage of offense? And what's in prayer but this twofold force to be forestalled ere we come to fall, or pardon being down? He's saying, can I be forgiven? He realizes it's not going to happen because he's not sorry. Hamlet assumes he's praying. He assumes he's sorry. He assumes he'll be forgiven. Right? And what's in prayer but this twofold force to be forestalled ere we come to fall, or pardon being down? Then I'll look up. My fault is past. But oh, what form of prayer can serve my term? Forgive me my foul murder? That cannot be, since I am still possessed of those effects for which I did the murder, my crown, mine own ambition, and my queen. May one be pardoned and retain the offense. Okay, this is really important here. Number one, I love the fact that he uses a colon after a complete sentence to set off the list. Just saying, you know how I feel about punctuation. But he lists out the reasons why he's not sorry. This is a perfect example of omniscience. Hamlet does not hear what we hear, right? He's sharing with us that he's not sorry, that he doesn't want to give the stuff back and atone for his crime. Therefore, he realizes he's not going to be forgiven, and he's just kind of like, I'm over it, right? I mean, in some ways. So, but he shares with us. He lies to everyone else in the play, but he shares it with us. It kind of makes us feel privy to him, and he's like that villain you love to hate. I think omniscience plays a role in that. But again, notice this idea of justice again, right? He says, may one be pardoned and retain the offense. Can you be forgiven and still keep all the stuff that you lied, cheated, and stole to get? In the corrupted currents of this world, offense's gilded hand may shove by justice, and often 'tis seen the wicked prize itself buys out the law. Boy, is that not true these days, right? Are people using the money they got doing illegal things to buy out the law, to get by justice? But 'tis not so above, there's no shuffing. There the action lies in its true nature, and we are selves compelled. Okay, so as you keep reading here, he's basically saying, I'm trying to repent, I can't. Now Hamlet comes upon him. Look at these hidden assumptions. Now might I do it, Pat? Now he's a praying, and now I'll do it. And so he goes to heaven, and so am I revenged. That would be scanned. So what is true justice? One of the words for essay 3. What is true revenge? I mean, is justice just a nicer way of saying revenge? Is it a euphemism for revenge? Lots of things to think about here in terms of what true justice would be. And would this be a capital punishment case? A villain kills my father, and I for that, I his sole son, do the same villain send to heaven? Oh, this is higher in salary, not revenge. I'm giving him a promotion, is what he's saying. With all his crimes broad blown, his flesh is may, and how his audit knows save heaven. But in our circumstance and course of thought, 'tis heavy with him. Am I then revenged? Again, this notion of revenge. To take him in the purging of his soul when he is fit and seasoned for his passage? No, up sword, and know thou a more horrid hent. Ooh, we know he's not fit and seasoned for his passage, right? We know that if Hamlet were to kill him, he's not sorry. He's not able to pray. He wouldn't be forgiven, and he wouldn't go to heaven. But look at that horrid hent, that alliteration, to really emphasize he wants to get him when he is drunk asleep in his rage, or in the incestuous pleasure of his bed. Look at all these hidden assumptions. You're going to get a chance to do it when he's drunk asleep, when he's raging, when he's in the incestuous pleasure of his bed. Again, I think he's already got too much of an interest in his mom's romantic life. Paging Dr. Freud, which again, when we look at Hamlet's mental state as well, at the end of the play, right, he talks about how it wasn't him, it was his madness. So in addition to issues of kind of the notion of justice and capital punishment, we also have this issue that the insanity defense, right? So all sorts of legal issues are present in this play that we're still grappling with nowadays. At a game of swearing or about some act that hath no relish of salvation in it, then trip him, that his heels may kick at heaven, and that his soul may be as damned and black as hell whereto it goes. My mother stays this physic, but prolongs thy sickly days. And then he exits. Okay. So again, I think he's very arrogant here. I think he's guilty of the word I keep referring to, hubris, right? Excessive pride or self-confidence. When characters get arrogant. In Greek tragedy, excessive pride toward the defiance of the gods leading to nemesis, right? So again, he's arrogant. He's kind of playing creator here, right? And due to his numerous hidden assumptions, he does not use Occam's razor, and many people die as a result of this after the scene, one of which is Polonius. Now, some people say, oh, he knows, he thinks it's Claudius behind the curtain, and he says that to Gertrude. Is it the king? Again, as I've mentioned before, the fact that he leaves and Claudius is still kneeling, it would be physically impossible for Claudius to get there before him, because he says, my mother stays, she's waiting for me, I'm on my way right now. And when he also behind the curtain, remember, Polonius cries, what ho, help, help, help. He says 5 words, and Hamlet would have recognized his voice. So I think the fact that Hamlet exits, the fact that Claudius is still kneeling and says these next 2 lines, which are very cool, by the way, and the fact that Polonius says 5 words are all support for my inference, right, that Hamlet knows it's Polonius behind the curtain. I just think at this point, he doesn't care. In some ways, now that he knows he's right, after the play, he gets arrogant, and his hubris replaces his logos. And we see that often with characters. We see that often with people in real life too. Now, look at this line by Claudius here. My words fly up, my thoughts remain below. Words without thoughts never to heaven go. He's letting us know again that he's not sorry. He's not going to be forgiven, and he will not eventually go to heaven. But he says it with rhyme, right? What does Shakespeare use here besides rhyme? He also uses antithesis which is that figure of speech with opposition for emphasis. My words fly up, my thoughts remain below. Then he used that reverse structure, words without thoughts never to heaven go. Normally we'd say would never go to heaven. But remember, when you're reading Shakespeare, sometimes he moves the words around in the sentences and phrases so they rhyme, because it's really cool to speak in rhyme. I fail every time. I try to keep it going more than, I don't know, I can't come up with a third line. So you see where I'm going with this. So I think this scene, to review, we learn about making inferences, right? We learn about worldview. We learn about hidden assumptions, Occam's razor, dialectical thinking, Rogerian strategy, concessions, right? Very important, right? What is explicit versus what is implicit, what is suggested versus what is clearly stated, right? These are all critical thinking strategies from writing logically, thinking critically that we can better understand by analyzing Hamlet. And specifically, I'd like to think this scene is very helpful as well. A couple other things to think about when we're looking at the play from a gender perspective. Obviously, we talked about Gertrude's situation. What about Ophelia's situation and those double standards with regard to the advice her brother gives her and the advice her father gives her? What about the idea that maybe Hamlet and Horatio's relationship is more than just a friendship? Again, from a gender perspective and from a queer theory perspective and an LGBTQIA perspective, I think we have many different possible ways to analyze the text to learn more about the human experience. And remember, with queer theory and LGBTQIA criticism, it's not just the presence, it's also the absence. Why isn't Ophelia given other options? Why does she have to get married? Why does she have to remain chaste for her husband? And what stereotypes and double standards and worldviews? So we have issues of gender identity. We have issues of feminism when we look at the way Ophelia and the way Gertrude are treated. We have issues of justice. We have issues of mental illness. So 4 themes resounding in Hamlet that are all possibilities to write about in essays 3 and 4. And I think you could expound upon them all by using the critical thinking strategies to analyze the characters' decision-making processes, so we can learn about life and the human experience. And again, remember your learning outcomes. We analyze, we evaluate, and then we compose and we synthesize our ideas with the critics. We synthesize our analysis with the critics to better be aware of rhetorical, right, situations, of rhetorical strategies, and that global awareness, that bigger picture, that idea of what did we learn about life and the human experience. So I hope this was helpful. Let me know if you have any questions, and thanks for watching and listening.